the first two rows here so that we don't look so dispersed. We're a very intimate crowd this afternoon, so it makes more sense to fill up from the front. Okay, thanks for coming. My name is Stephen Langford. I'm the faculty manager responsible for planning and social enterprise at Cornerstone. And thank you for taking off your time to come and join us this afternoon. So as I said, we had quite an intimate crowd, but fortunately this event is being live streamed, so there are an audience in the virtual world following us as well. And that is why I had to sort of wait a few minutes before I could start. Are we on? And it's also being recorded so that that will be replayed on our social media platforms during the course of the week and so on. We also have partnerships with the Argus. So the inputs from the panelists will hopefully be converted into articles which will be published as opinion pieces in the Argus. And then also it will be played on Bush Radio over a period of over 3 segments, which will include a recording of this panel discussion as well as a different panel discussions discussing some of the inputs that were made here today. So I'm going to hand over to the head of our Department of Sociology and Community Development, Henrietta, who will introduce the panelists for us today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's an absolute honor to actually be here as a facilitator of this very exciting discussion, hopefully, that we will have. Not hopefully, definitely. But before I introduce our panelists, I'd just like us to reflect a little bit on community development and its roots. Community development is often perceived or framed as a voluntary act. It's people doing voluntary work. And the purpose and the reason for this gathering today is to actually begin to interrogate and go beyond the community development as a voluntary work. And the people that will be speaking to those elements are the experts in their fields. And they each bring a particular view, a particular stance, a particular energy to community development in their various different contexts. And I shall introduce you to them. Each of these panelists today have worked tirelessly and continue to work tirelessly to promote community development as policymakers or being involved in policy work, as academics, as practitioners, most important people as practitioners. So today we have 4 panelists, and they will speak to the professionalization of community development from their various perspectives. And before I introduce them individually, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background, but I would like them to come and join me on the stage. So our panelists. So we have Nikki, Heinelise, Marcel, and Cornel. and Cornel. Each of these 4 individuals on the stage have a long history in community development in their various capacities. And when we spoke earlier a little bit about, so what's motivated you to get involved in community development? And it's really interesting that each of them have a unique story. So at the moment, I'm going to start with Heinelise, who's right on my far left. She's currently the CEO of an organization called Sinatemba Swartland. And what inspires her is that she always felt the need to respond to elements or issues that communities confronted by. She comes from a theology background, I'm not going to go into the intricacies how she moved from theology to community development. But the organization she works for focuses on community health. And they work in 11 communities in the Swartland area. And they work in partnership with the Department of Health. So when I spoke with all 4 of these ladies, the word partnership popped up time and time again. So they will speak to all of that. Heindelise is also one of our students, one of our honors students here at Cornerstone. And I'm very proud of her as the program head for community development sociology. Then Nikki, welcome Heindelise, welcome Nikki, is also one of our students. Nikki comes from a student activist background. She's currently doing our highest certificate in community development, and she works as an auxiliary social worker at the Big Issue, where she did a little bit of background about some of the things she does there, where she works with marginalized adults and facilitating access to education, training, opportunities, job opportunities, skills development. So not just the individuals, but also their children are involved in the whole process. Because I think often when we work with adults, we sometimes forget that there are children involved as well. So we are very proud of Nikki and the work she does. And we're very happy to have her here. And she will speak from her experience as a practitioner as well as a student. And the next person I would like to introduce you is Marcellont. She's sitting next to Nikki, the beautiful lady with the tiger outfit. She's a tiger. She's a tiger. Welcome, Marcel. Marcel is the head of department at Department of Social Work at the University of Western Cape. Her background is in a focus is engaging as a strong focus on people at risk, young people at risk. She says, I touch people other people don't want to touch. So welcome, Marcel. So Marcel will speak from a sort of academic perspective. And then, last but not least, Cornel, who has got a long history in being involved in the process of professionalization of community development. And she will talk to that in particular. She is very involved in the policy process. She's also assisted us as an institution to get our qualifications up and running, and we're very grateful for that. And she continues to have input and engagements with our students around the issues around policy and professionalization of community development. So these are our panelists. So I'm not going to take up their time. I'm just going to hand over to Cornel, who will kick off the conversation and present to you professionalization of community development from a policy perspective. Oh, there's one there.
I think so. We'll stay seated. It's much easier to, as community development practitioners, I remember one of the first things when I stopped as a practitioner and I ended up at university, I was often asked by my then HOD Cornel, why are you sitting down when you teach students? And it's just because it's so different. The whole philosophy of community development and its principles for equality and empowerment, etc., it starts in sitting down, looking each other in the eye and connecting. And so I'm very glad that tonight we can connect. I have had quite a nice, I would say, this is how we roll, like the students say, but I had a nice roll so far with Cornerstone Institute. He's one of the higher education institutions that has from day one been involved in spearheading professionalization. So what is this professionalization of community development? There's a short history in the sense that from 2009, the heat was given by practitioners to the then Minister of Social Development and also the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. A little bit at the Department of Trade and Industry, but we found that our public sector practitioners started giving quite a bit of heat through the unions and say, we are not being recognized. Yet, if we look at the statistics, public servants in community development is the smallest percentage of practitioners. The biggest part of practitioners is in the non-governmental organizations, and then a huge part in the voluntary part. And this is why our facilitators indicated the problem has been that people assume if you're in community development practice that you're a volunteer. Yes, it is a huge part of voluntary work, and it is even if you're a paid practitioner, we've discussed it earlier, how there isn't really hours, because development is with and by the people, and so life happens, and when life happens, it sometimes happens late at night, it happens on Saturdays, it happens on Sundays, it happens. And so we have that part where there's been a drive. And in our South African context, in the apartheid days, community development was driven actually by activists. One of the things we forget about South Africa is that we actually had a ministry for community development in the apartheid days. We had a minister for it too. It was for Hart. And so often when we started this professionalization process, something that came strong from the people was that we will not have a ministry of community development, just because of that history. But because of that history and the marginalization and legislation of inequality, we found that activists actually did what community development practitioners do today. So in 2009, we started the process. I'm not sure if it was for my past sins that I got involved in it, but it was a process that was close to my heart. I was back since 2006, back in South Africa after having worked in several of the SADC countries in development with cabinets and parliaments. Now, I think everybody always says, you look just like 2009 when we saw you. And then I said, yes, the professionalization has made me tired at times, but not older. But if you work with governments in development, that makes you old. So if you go and see what I looked like in 2002 to 2006, two different people, from a young, happy person to a tired old lady trying to make development work. And so in 2009, South African government said, we want to professionalize. And we need to, and I'm going to use it in the Western Cape, we need to mobilize people, because I know it's almost a swear word in this province. But the mobilization of people is what makes things change. And so we started broad consultations and said, how do we mobilize? And so in short, at the time, we approached the then Council for Social Work and said we want to professionalize community development practitioners. Also because several community development practitioners were qualified social workers. And so the council said never. I like never. My mother always says never say never. And so we said, well, we have to continue, because two things drove professionalization and still does: quality and standardization. And so although it's done by many people out of their own goodwill and good heart, it's too good and good not too good at times because of lack of skills. And so we work with communities, and they have no means to ensure quality. So they sometimes fall victim of something that we want to do. Not something they would want to do or drive and champion, but what we think. So we come as an outsider and say, I think you should. And so the professionalization is a lot about, let's standardize. Let's get everybody with the same knowledge, skills, and attributes. And these attributes are very important. Marcel and I often say it's going to be quite challenging to get a code of ethics into an activist. You see, an activist is somebody that works on the edge of a square box. And the minute we don't get our way, we jump outside the box. And that ethical practice is going to be a challenge. But I'm sure she will speak more to that. And so in 2009, we said, right, let's start with qualifications. Let's say, how do we train practitioners? And the then minister said, it must be all-inclusive. This process must not leave anybody out. So we don't want an elitist professional body, where often to be a professional is an elite body. And so in the rest of the world, many countries, Ireland, United Kingdom, they've all tried to professionalize community development, and they failed. Halfway through, they failed because people would say it goes against community development, that is equality, empowerment, and because this is elitist. So in South Africa, we say everybody can register. And so if you have no formal qualification, there's even a process of how you can get into that to say, but I can practice at this level. Right up to if you have a PhD and how you will practice. So as a start, we did 4 qualifications. One, a national certificate. So that's what we call a level 4. It's for somebody who didn't finish secondary school. Then the level 5 that runs at 2 places, an occupational one at a college or a higher certificate like Cornerstone is doing. And so that's for somebody who wants to move in to the practice, or for our youth who didn't get matric exemption. And so that level 5 gets you into what we call the level 8 degree. It's a 4-year degree. But here comes the other story again, where Cornerstone is the champion of it in South Africa, is to offer the honours program. The level 8, 1 year, but they run it over 2 years part-time. Because so many of us, I'm originally qualified as a sociologist. You see, sociologists, we watch people. And we watch them, and so I got tired of watching them and wanting to do something with them, and that's how I got into community development. And so we will always have practitioners that comes from another qualification. And so this honours program of Cornerstone is to migrate me into community development. Whether I came from a theology background, sociology, development studies, whatever my background, I can come through that. So that was in short what was done. And then we developed, and I was here, when was I here, Renee? Last week, no? Last of last week, with the higher certificate group on the policy for social service practitioners in community development. And so that policy is what gives us the norms and standards. So it tells us what are the norms, in what little box are we operating, and how do we quality assure that. And so these are all draft documents at the moment. Why? Parliament must sign off on it. And Parliament can't sign off on it until the professional board has been elected. So next year there will be national elections, well, nominations and elections for board members. And then once the board is endorsed, then there will be a board for community development practitioners. Just like we have a board for social work, a board for child and youth, and so we will have a board for community development under the now Council for Social Service Practitioners. So it's no longer never. So they were right in a sense. It was never going to happen with the Council for Social Work. But now that there's a Council for Social Service Practitioners, there are these boards under that. And so that's in short the journey that we've been in and out and about. The last part that I just want to highlight for the group is that this 18th of November, 2021, 22 and 25 November, there will be a Western Cape outreach on community development professionalization. So anybody who wants to know or wants to attend, it will be in different areas. The 18th will be in the Central Karoo area. And I think West Coast is on the 25th. The others are metro, so it's sort of in the area close by. But please feel free to send an email to chairperson at SARGT. It's not because we are sighing about all of this. It stands for South African Association for Community Development, SAACD. So chairperson at sargt.com, and you will be able to get more information. So it's open for anybody who wants to know more. You can also, if you don't want to attend, but just be able to link and get onto the database so that you receive correspondence and that you can be part of the elections and nominations next year, please feel free to send an email. So I'll end there for now on the policy side, because you saw the audience when you said, Cornel, we'll talk about policy. Because I'm like that. Policy is all the legality, but in this case it's an exciting policy, and I will hand to Marcel, who will make policy happen for us.
Thank you very much, Cornel, for that input. And we will leave questions or comments until the end. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to jot them down. After all the speakers have done their little bit, you will then have the opportunity to pose questions or make comments based on the presentations. Right, thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I think what you saw now, that's what they do to social workers. They kind of... my inclusion in this panel today is such a reflection of the spirit of what this community development practitioners, the whole move is. It's about inclusivity. It's about working across borders. It's about collaborating. And so what I want to do is just look at the issue from an academic point of view. The Department of Social Work is going to house the ComDev undergrad degree in our department as a first step, So I would like to reflect on some of the challenges. And I think the first challenge is most third-year degree graduate students take at least 8 years to finish that 3-year degree. And so apart from curriculation and content of curriculum, maybe that's one of the areas that we need to think about. What are we going to do to learn from the models that are available, learn from the best practice models? So the fact that students who enroll for 3-year degree takes 8 years to finish it, it's not only about them. It's about context, it's about structure, it's about systemic issues. And so those are the kind of stuff that we need to consider. And I think the first call here would be to develop information about that first cohort. What do we need to ensure that they're not going to take 8 years, that we flag and we identify risk factors early on? So that takes us to the next thing, and that's the whole issue of student experiences. You speak to any one of the students in the department and you give our name to any one of them. They will tell you, we hate them. We hate them. They're determined to give us all nervous breakdowns, especially this time of the year. They pick on us. So we have to think about the whole student experience and what it is that we can do differently. And so I would like to just reflect the social work, community development dichotomy and relationship. During the time that I started working as a social worker, I know you're thinking it was when Noah left the Sea Scouts. So 38 years is a long time. But community workers at that time were the people that went to prison. They were the people that worked alongside social workers, but they became the fall guys. Because as Dr. Hart says, that their engagement with issues, and I think there's a heavy reliance on following their gut, being able to read a situation, where we teach social workers to kind of follow approach, follow a model. And because of the nature of the work, the kind of student we're going to get, you need to take that into consideration. And so the whole issue of what is that curriculum going to look like? Are we going to kind of dole out the same kind of curriculum and get public spaces like this and make speeches about decolonization. But it's same old, same old. We don't have the luxury to do that. So we've got to ensure that that curriculum speaks to the principles embodied in the kind of things that Dr. Cornel was talking about, or Dr. Hart was talking about, that it reflects the pursuance of social justice, of anti-discriminatory practices, of inclusivity. So our curriculum must reflect that. And I think when we're looking at the issue of ethics, I teach an ethics course to the 4th year students in social work at UWC. I think, despite the fact that I lay claim to teaching, my learning and teaching philosophy is an applied learning, very few of the students get it right when you ask them to identify an ethical dilemma. So those are the kind of stuff that we need to look at. What skills are we going to give these graduates in terms of ethics? Not only ethicality, making ethical decisions, looking at the perils of duplicitous relationships. I mean, I know community workers way back then. They would go to the local gang lord and have a few drinks with him in order to get by, to be able to do some work. If you do that in social work, they'll kick you out of the country. So we've got to kind of start interrogating those issues. And so it's not only about ethics and ethic principles, but it's also the notion of ethics of care. And that the ethics of care is rooted in transformation, transformative education, that it's rooted in what's contextual and appropriate for us. We can't kind of take old Sarah Banks stuff, who's written extensively, and expect our students to kind of make it their Bible. And so I think as a department, we have the privilege of having learned from everybody. So we don't have to repeat the same mistakes. We'd be really dumb to do that. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think the challenge that and the opportunity for cooperating. I've often said, at UWC, there's always place at the table for another person. And I think that's going to be more important to us now, that we work with yourselves, with other people, so that we can grow this emerging professional development and profession, so that they're no longer in the shadow of other practitioners. Social workers could not do what they do without community workers, without folk like this, and my colleague there. Yes, we can, give leadership to the legislation that we have obligations with, but the other skills, and that's where this profession, and I think we owe it to them to aid their development and to aid the emerging as their own profession, so that, those unsung heroes, those people who've toiled in community, has an opportunity to make their contribution like they did before. Thank you, ladies and gents.
Thank you very much, Marcel, for that insight. Much appreciated. And then we shall hand over to Nikki to give her
Thanks. Pleased to be here. Community activism. I was asked why. I think it's my background from coming from a student activism and fighting the apartheid, and I come from Pontyville. So for me was you see injustice, you step in. For me, it's about speaking for the voice, for those who don't have a voice, as Ms. Londt said earlier, and to work with people that you don't want, other people don't want to work with, because we tend to snub our noses. Oh no, that's not where we want to go. And everybody is special, and working at the big issue, I work with adults that comes from prison, that's homeless, that's foreign nationals. So I don't look at the person. I don't look at who you are, but at the person who's inside. And I try and help from where do you want to go, what do you want to do, and enhance their wishes, and not putting what I want to do in them, but also giving them that voice of, you are worthy, and getting people's dignity back, because our people has lost dignity. If we see our young people in the roads who's on drugs, and the gateway of addiction is not alcohol or drugs, it's the broken homes, the abuse, there's no love, and our people are yearning for that. And with doing community work, it's hard. Henrietta asked me, who takes care of you when you do all these things? Sometimes you forget about you, but in the past years, and doing this course also teaches you how you must take care of yourself, and that you can't take care of others if you are damaged or sick, and dealing with your demons as well. Because sometimes dealing with clients and with people triggers things that's in you as well. And that's the good thing about dealing with self within this course. That's what we learned. I mean, we did wellness and the depth of wellness and all that, And I want to thank Cornerstone and Community Chess, because I went to study because I couldn't afford to go study, even now. And because I have access to resources, I went to look for things, I read things, community newspapers, I go online, and that's how I access this, and I participate in community chess programs that I had prior as well. And a lot of times our community workers that works hard in our townships, in our communities, are not recognized because they're not literate or they don't have education, but they have the heart. And being an auxiliary social worker, I deal with clients that come and complain about social workers that works in the government department, that don't do their jobs, that don't care. And yet they have ethics that's in place, but nobody's holding them accountable for what's happening. And our community don't know their rights from A to Z, or what they must do, or know that they can actually complain and report those people. But we don't know, and that's, I think, sometimes where I educate people and say, listen, this is your rights, but with your rights comes responsibility. And that's how you, and educating people, and being a community, being a social worker and / community worker, where two are combined, but it's also different in many ways as well. But for me, I'm blessed to sort of fuse both, because I work in so many diverse sectors, because I only don't work at the big issue. I work within my community, I work within my church, and I work with drug addicts in a recovery home. And I'm currently trying to work, I'm from Woodstock, so there's a place called the Plaza, which is a HR hideout, and I'm currently working in that community where I'm trying to work with young women to change their lives, but not preaching to them, but by being human with them and recognizing things within them, the qualities. Before I came here, I actually came from there, and I met a young girl who can sing beautifully, and you ask these young people, why are you on this path? And it's heartbreaking, and people say, my stepfather, this, at home, this is happening. And sometimes I wish I had lots of money, where I can just buy a big land and just help people and just put them there and say, listen, we're going to make this work as us. And give them that power and earn and own ownership, that they can change things within themselves, because sometimes we forget, and we tell people you must go work, but people have inability to do things for themselves as well. You don't have to work for someone to be something or make money. You can be an entrepreneur and do your own, but skills development is also important. But it takes work and patience, and some of us don't. It's a job, it's stats. You must fill the quota, and that's what government wants, and that's what we work for, and that's wrong. And our government must learn also to see that we're not working with things, we are working with human beings who has feelings, who has emotion. And you can't just do things just because it must be done. And it takes time to work through those things. Development doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. For someone can take 5 years, someone can take 2 years, where I've experienced where it took me almost 4 years to work with one person and encourage that person that he has the capability of changing his life. And only now it's coming through. He's becoming an entrepreneur. He's creating his own business slowly but surely. And these are things that makes me smile, because for me, I don't earn a lot of money, but I need to survive. But still, at the end of the day, you know, just to see someone happy and that smile and with doing this course, there's so many obstacles that you do when you study. You're adult, you study, you've got your community work, you have assignments to do, you have all these things, and then things happen, like as Cornel said, life happens, and then you think, oh my God, I have an assignment, it must be in by 12 o'clock now. And I don't have a laptop, and I don't have a Wi-Fi at home. So you have all these things, but for me is, as I'm really grateful and I really appreciate being given opportunity to study, because I know what is education is power to a lot of things, and I try to educate myself apart from studying as well. And with as you said earlier on, with this whole professionalization, ethics is important, because we have community workers in our community take advantage of so many things within their communities. Where abuse is happening, where donations come in, they take it for themselves, or they sell it, or they make money, or whatever. And when things like this, nobody can just come and do as they please. This ethics is a standard you must uphold, norms and standards, and I appreciate the fight for that, and you know, it makes your life worth that you can see this, you can reap the benefits and teach people what they can say no to and yes to. This person can't do this kind of work within your community because they don't have qualifications and they don't have rights, because people take advantage of certain things within our communities. And this is a really good, thank you for the fight, Cornel. And it's people like this that we need behind us. You work in the ground, in the grassroots, but sometimes people sit in their high towers. They don't have a clue what you deal with and what you go through with communities. These people, if you get into the meeting, they will shout at you, or they will tell you, no, we don't want this one here, or there's dynamics involved. So you have to, you know, think on your feet how to work with things. But for me, I'm grateful, and with being a really social worker and being in my community, I love people, I love what I do, and my gratification and thank you is a smile and knowing I've changed one person's life, not for anything but for that person to change and grow and know that he's worthy and he's got his dignity back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. It's truly inspiring.
There's a lot of passion there. Well, I've started in the beginning of the year my journey with natural hair. So throughout the year, someone makes a comment and says, you have NGO hair. So I looked at the person and I asked, what do you mean? So the person smiled and didn't say anything after that. But it made me think, there's also the perception that exists, if you have natural hair, that you are unorganized and that you are lazy. I have had those comments and that experience before. And the same with NGOs. The perception is there that we are unorganized. And the perception is there that we have no idea what we are doing, and that we are just there because of the passion, and we are just there because of the love of it. But in actual fact, that is not true. And therefore, it is so good to know that that it's going to be professionalized, so there can be structure, so that that perception can change, so that people can look at us and know and see, but well, these people are organized, and they know exactly why they exist. They exist with a purpose, for a purpose, and we need to acknowledge them. So, yeah, in my experience within the field, there is a lot of things that we as NGOs we are missing the mark, and we are just carrying on. There's so many NGOs that pops up and fly by nights, and just they're just there, and tomorrow they're not there, and for so many different reasons. So I think it's going to also help to sort of not only streamline but also manage that. So if there's a specific structure and a specific standard that we all need to uphold, that can also sort of manage that. People can know that we can't just pop up and tomorrow we're not there because we need to mean business. I've this year, look, I have a blue folder with me with a long speech, but now I'm just talking whatever pops up. As NGOs, we are also often missing the mark with regards to truly developing agency, and relating to the theme that we have, reclaiming agency. We as NGOs often with the handouts and with whatever we do and the delivering of the services, we are creating or building and adding onto that dependency. And our clients and our beneficiaries, they are becoming dependent on us without us knowing. There was an interesting article that I've read, and it is about Wheatley is a surname. And she referred to a hero where politicians and NGOs often present themselves as a hero. And that is so true. So the NGO is then perceived as the one with all the skills and the ability, and is just up there, I want to help you. And then on the other side, we have the client that just wants to be saved. And therefore, we then just carry on with that cycle of dependency. So the way that we are doing development, and hopefully with your professionalization, that will all push NGOs in that direction, where we would then really just realize that we need to intentionally do development. I get really passionate about this, people. We don't really need to do development intentionally, and things can just happen accidentally. And we can't only be driven by passion and for the love of things, because we, at the end, people need to become their own hero. They need to become their own hero and become actively involved in their own development. And as my colleague said, it's going to be that's a process, but it's a process that we are willing to commit to. And I just go back to the perception that I've spoke about earlier. I've been in a year-long negotiation with a corporate company there in the Swartland, just pretty much trying to convince him and understand that we as NGOs are, because of us, your workers can be productive. Because of us, you can have a profit. So just helping them to understand that we have a place and that we are contributing value in there. So that went well after a year. But that the perception is there, where they think that we don't know what we are doing, and they don't have respect for our work. So with this process, it would really just add value to our work. So there's that exploitation. I'm hoping not only with this professionalization would bring a structure, and it would set a standard and the ethics that we so desperately need. Because as NGOs, we often contradict our work through our practice. Because we say the one thing, we will do this, but at the end we do the complete opposite. We'd also then make that people don't respect what we do. And then we want our work to be valued, but our practice contradicts that. So we do need that. But within that space, we also need some form of protection, and I'm hoping it will come out, because there's a lot of exploitation that takes place with NGOs, because we are perceived as the cheap labor. Instead of government paying for expensive services, service delivery, or not only government, private, corporate sectors, all the others, they would then use the NGOs to deliver that service for free. And in that, we often feel exploited, and that unequal partnership that then exists. And so therefore I really like that there would be some protection. I would just want to add off, and I'm going to the blue folder, just to read the last few, because I can't remember it out of heart. Sorry, I'm there. Yes. Professionalization of community development would add the following value to our practices as NPOs. It will provide strategic direction because of the specific policy. It will also create a platform for strategic thinking and leadership development. It will improve our confidence with regarding when engaging with other sectors. It will improve effectiveness because of the standards in place. It will also increase our credibility of NPOs. It will reduce the number of fly-by-nights. It will also the respect and acknowledgement of our work, but also the protection that we need against exploitation in unequal partnerships. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Heinrich and all the other panelists. Now to the audience. I'll go to this gentleman and then the gentleman at the back. Is there a mic? Maybe you want to...
Perhaps I can make a comment. I am from the Blue Downs area there. And I was approached some time ago by an NGO. It's a woman. She was a nurse, and she injured her back, and then her husband was a mechanic, and the son, and so on. And they were running an NGO. And they gave the impression that they care about the women, sewing and doing so. And it turned out it was an employment agency for the family, the husband and the wife and the son. And they were completely arrogant. It was their thing, it was their properties, what their ownership is, what everything and so on. So my point was, at the end of it, and they came to me, they said, April, we want you with your legal background, we want you to come in and so on and so on. And I asked them, I said, you know what, is everything in order? They said, yes. I said, what do you mean everything in order? And they wanted me to give them legal advice for free. And I said, I've got no problem. But then people came to me and said, they are very abusive. The husband, the son, has got no qualification. But he is an advisor. Advisor is what? That's number one. Number two, my second comment is this. Most of the NGOs, there's a perception also that most of the NGOs, the people there, it's an afterthought, it's a work. They couldn't get a work somewhere else. Now they come and do this. And at the end of the day, nobody can tell them anything. So professionalization will help and so on. And the other comment is that at the end of the day is sometimes you do a job that the government should do. You take something that is very important out of the hands of the government and you allow the government to get away, because most of the funding that used to come during apartheid to the NGOs here, and they were doing a good job, those funds no longer come. Those funds end up with government. And then the others, and the government use that. And then the other NGOs, they struggle now and they must see how to get by. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The gentleman at the back. Before the gentleman goes, is anybody who would like to comment? Okay? Okay.
Hi, I'd just like to make a few comments. Community work is seen as the soft skill and the soft work and so on. And it is often assumed that it doesn't have meaning and it doesn't have content and it doesn't have structure and it doesn't contribute because there is no evident, hardcore concrete building that stands at the end of the process, like engineers when they built Atlantis, when they built Mitchell's Plain. The understanding was that they're building communities. They built concrete structures and they expect us to develop communities, that communities and good things will come out of these physical structures without the parallel building of communities and so on. And so one's battle is often against the engineers, the planners, and all of those kinds of people at one particular level who would argue against you as to why do you need a social space? Why do you need social infrastructure within this whole development? Why do you need people's participation when you're building a big project and so on and so on? So that's one of the, since the 80s, that's one of the, when the state had these big projects, that's one of the key kind of problems that one had. On the other hand, nowadays, one have a lot of rabble-rousers who, when there's an issue in the Swartland, and you've got your fair share of people in the farming community who represent communities, especially when farm workers' rights are affected, dan jump Sammy Klaasen op en sê, ek is die hero van die gemeenskap, en so on and so on. Gee R20 in my account, en so on and so on, en dan gaan ons die probleem oplos, en ons gaan sommer die boer nou hof toe vat, en ons gaan vir hulle like sort of uitsort. That kind of rebel-rousing kind of thing, without development, without social cohesion, without infrastructure, without a developmental process that takes place beyond that of organizing that farm community and making them being able to deal with their rights in a cohesive way and so on. So one often sees that. So when Dr. Lionel Lowe taught us the issue of Verino and all the various elements of activism, of being the legal kind of personality, being the organizer, being the supporter, being all of those elements. For me, when I hear what you're saying, when students come and register, I question, what is it So my question to you is, what is their commitment on the day or when they register and they attend the social work department? What are they coming to do there? So for me, that would be the first question. Wat soek jy hier? What is your commitment? And hammer them on what is their commitment. If they don't have commitment, it's nie nog 'n klas wat hulle kom bywoon om 'n salaris te verdien. Hulle kan computer science aan 'n plek gaan doen en aan 'n office sit en mense opbel en sê, we want to sell another cell phone. They can go and do that. But if they don't have the commitment to work, and if they already don't have a commitment and understanding of volunteerism, then it doesn't help them to come to a social work department. Want dan gaan hulle 10 jaar vat om klaar te maak because they don't understand the basic principles of what it is that they are doing there. So for me, there must be that basic commitment and so on and so on. Social workers place their lives at risk. They go into communities who are already at risk. And nowadays, at the beginning, we dealt with dacha and mandrakes and other kinds of drugs. Now you're dealing with tukken and so on and so on. In the Swartland, in Citrusdal, there are now many drug dealers who've taken over that community, rural communities. And the social workers cry there because their lives are threatened and so on. And there's nothing or very little they can do against these very strong opponents of social cohesion and development. So those are some of the elements, but for me it would be, what's the commitment of the student? What's the risk that they're prepared to take? What is their developmental perspective on being there and interacting with the profession?
Okay, thank you very much. Leo, sorry, I have to observe protocol. The lady indicated that she... yes, please.
Thank you. My name's Jackie. I have a couple of observations. I'm a community activist, volunteer, full-time. Yeah, because... So, my observation, and I'm glad that you have it, I have a couple of concerns because I'm an activist. Nick and I go way back. So the formalization of being an activist changes the dynamic of an organization and a community. Last year I was at the Reclaim Agency, and one particular evening the talks was on NGOs, NPOs, CBOs, and the amount of registered NGOs that exist in South Africa today. It's quite alarming. Based on that, subsequently, my experience has been that you have professionals in some of these NGOs or these organizations, and some of them seems to have been started with the sole purpose of at times undermining the very community that they proclaim to work for, because they are funded by big business. And big business, who's the donor, drives that particular NGO and their agenda. So my comment and observation is how, in essence, will this particular legislation and that direct that kind of input, because it's actually more destructive than anything else, because it leaves a community with a distrust for NGOs, because quite honestly, that's where I'm at, because I've seen how destructive it can be.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, Leo?
Okay, yes, my name is Leo. I've had the privilege of piloting the community development program here at Cornerstone. I'm one of the lecturers. But also, I've done quite interesting research on caregivers who are working with older patients in hospices, old age homes, and so forth. And so part of the research project was to make a case, for the professionalization of caregiving, right? So I'm actually thinking back now that I should have met you, the time I was doing my field work, because you seem to have more, sort of intimate knowledge about what's happening in government, particularly the Department of Social Development. I had the privilege to interview the then Deputy Director General here at Parliament, but it wasn't that informative. So sitting here, following your discussion about the policy and what has been implemented so far has been very, informative. So basically, community practitioners are not the only people, or rather, professionals who have not been, recognized We have had this case. I mean, we have this case with caregivers. We had this case with community health workers. I think SANC is now registering them, right? And yeah, so there are many other low skill professions which have been seen as low skill, and there's no need to to professionalize, to train them. And people always have this view that once you professionalize, it's sort of it's sort of an affront to the voluntary ethos, and as well as the selflessness that that is the hallmark of such professions. So so that argument still stands. I mean, because a lot of people are making a case against the professionalizing, because one of the points that they put forward is that once you provide qualifications, once you provide the professional qualifications, and there's an expectation that this becomes a higher paying job, right? And given the South African economic context, right? And resources are very I mean, we don't have enough resources, right? So when and this is going to be the case. I mean, community development is going to be a professional occupation, right? But now we need to think about how this will pan out in future, right? Especially the expectation that people now have qualifications and they need to be to be remunerated commensurate with their skills. And secondly, I just wanted to know, since there's been a lot of movement towards professionalization, has there been any discussion in terms of creating sort of creating career pathways? Because many professions are dead end, in the sense that you just become, for example, a community practitioner, and then what, right? So people yearn for career growth, right? So I just want you to sort of indulge me with the details in terms of how this is being structured.
Thank you, Leo. Before we take any more comments or questions, can I ask the panelists to respond to some of the issues that were raised? And I've just jotted down a couple. I think one of the key issues that some of you have addressed as well. Marcel, you spoke about students dropping out, and the gentleman asked, so how do you address that?
I think the good shift that's happened is that social work as a qualification, or it's not the only way to get into university. If you failed at everything else, do my social work. So that has changed, okay? Because admission requirements are different. And so we have to keep the balance that we don't mimic what happened during the apartheid years, where we exclude people. Everybody has a right if they qualify. It's our responsibility to ensure that the curriculum, that the student attributes are what's going to make a difference to social work. And so those people who are coming in thinking that, I'm going to get my degree and make lots of money, after they go into the field the second year, they're screaming and running around. They want to get out of the profession. So I think from the university's point of view, we are applying our minds and doing everything possible to ensure that we graduate the people who's going to make a contribution. And there's always going to be those folk who are exploitative, who is not going to do due diligence. But that's our commitment. And I think taking 8 years, it's across the university. It's not specific to social work. In fact, the Department of Social Work at UWC is doing pretty well with that. You might want to know.
Thank you, Marcel. I think it's you that raised the issue around NGOs, and I wrote down here, how will legislation direct rogue NGOs? So that is a question to you, Cornel, with this whole professionalization process.
Yes, and I think it relates to one of the other comments also of what is happening when we're in communities with people, and I think a lot of it relates to people losing their jobs, low employment and employability, and so people start a business. And this is the bad part. I'll never forget my niece, when she was in kindergarten, she had to go and talk about what does a godmother do. Well, I had lots of people phoning me at that stage. I was working all over Africa, and so when she was asked what does her godmother do, she says she makes money out of the poor. But it was such a grounding factor for me when my sister phoned me and said, you know what Eloise said today? And when the kindergarten teacher asked my sister, she didn't help, because she said to my sister, so what is it really that your sister does? And she says, nobody is really sure. And this was in, 2000, 2001. But I think what has happened is that we tend to make business out of poverty. And so it comes back to this ethics issue. There's two things that has ground me, and it still grounds me to this day. As Gandhi also said, if you really want to see change, you must be prepared to die for it, not to live a good life out of it. And the second thing that I think that we also need to keep in mind is that when we are community development practitioners, we are change agents. So we're a catalyst. We spoke a lot about that. And Nikki has raised the issue of, you must get your own suitcase sorted because you can't get your own issues on the table, because it's not about you as a practitioner. But I think what has happened, partly because of poverty and lack of employment and opportunity, people start with the best intentions. And we discussed last week how a lot of things we do as practitioners is subconscious. We do wrong things, but it's unintentional. But it's because of the context where we come from. What I would love to see with NGOs and the CBOs and the NPOs is that if every community development practitioner does his or her job properly, then NGOs will govern development. And I've often said this to students also and community meetings where people say, but the government. And I say, no, we the government. Because we're in a democracy. But we're still grappling with our history where we were told, no, government will provide. Government provided us a square box and they kept us there and they controlled how that box operates. And so we need to bring a mind shift in practitioners to say, you must start today to work yourself out of a job. And so if we don't empower communities as development practitioners, this is where the professionalization will help. Communities can tell you off quicker. They can sort you. And so if they tell you off, it's because sometimes how they feel. Now imagine people that's free to tell you off are now empowered with their rights to say to you, you, Wenna, as a practitioner, are not following your book. This is what you're supposed to come and do for us. And so then I think NGOs will come to the fore how they work in other countries, more affluent countries. Because NGOs are supposed to be by the people, for the people. And the money should be channeled through them. But at the moment, it's a risk. Often people highlight this with, the days of the NGO coalition, etc. I was part of that when I was at IDT. But if we today start giving money too quickly for NGOs and for MPOs even, then we run the risk because of the people that's in charge that are the do-gooders, intentionally or unintentionally self-enriching themselves out of it. And so if we start empowering communities to say no, community organization is a vehicle through which we get organized, not a vehicle through which we get told what to do, a vehicle through which we get organized because government and corporate, they can't communicate with us as a community of 30 or 35,000 people, so they need an organization or a structure. So one of the things that we've done in all three levels of the qualifications is a theme, or in the degree modules, that focuses on organizational development, where that practitioner is trained on how to set up an organization with the community to run on their own, and then I disappear as a practitioner. But that's not going to happen now. We're only training them now. And so I think activists like yourself, it's very important that you're part of this process so that you start being that change agent now already, so that we can get people to realize it's not business as usual, and to make money out of development, you're in the wrong profession. It's about servant leadership, and it's about giving so that you are no longer needed. And so you must give everything you have. And the funny thing is, the more you give to people, the more they actually enrich you. But it's that mindset. So I think if we look a bit on that, there is a lot in the norms and standards policy about that. And so those of you who like these policy documents, they are available. Send the email and we'll share them. I see Berenice is here, so she can part of this outreach that government is going to do in the Western Cape this month. They will make those documents available too. On the issue of caregivers, next week, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday, we're finishing the new bill for Parliament on social service practitioners. And so I've mentioned the first three would be child and youth, who has a board, social work, who has a board, community development, that will have a board next year. But two of the other up-and-coming occupations is caregivers and early childhood development, ECD. There's a battle, we can't call it the battle of the sexes, but there's a battle of the occupations at the moment where ECD is not sure should they register under social service practitioner or education. And so there's that process. But we're writing the bill of such where we say these are the three professional occupations and other similar occupations in the service provision for society. So even though we know ECD and caregivers and healthcare workers are busy organizing themselves, we don't know in a year or two's time if there won't be another sector. There's two things that I love about the process in South Africa, and that is that we needed to organize ourselves for this recognition, yes, for the protection, but most importantly, for the protection of our communities and of society. And so it could not have come at a better time. And so there's a global trend at the moment where everybody professionalizes everything. Luckily in South Africa, we legislate everything, don't you? It's like we legislate stuff that, there's policies that I don't even know of, but as long as the policy is there, whether it's implementable or not. Another thing that CDPs must do with communities, because in a democracy, the people write the policy. But we don't even know ourselves how to write a policy. But then we take it to the people to say, buy into the policy, have a meal, sign here, support the policy. It's not how it should be. On the career path issue, we're working closely together with Umalusi. So there's the quality councils for training. So there's Umalusi, that's the school guys. Then there's the college guys with QCTO, Quality Council for Trade and Occupations, who, by the way, in professional occupations run with the professional body right up to level 10. And then there is the South African Qualifications Authority. And so 5 weeks ago, I was at the SAQUA 21-year celebration of what they call the NQF. See, now we go, it's late, so we must, get you into bad terminology now. But it's the National Qualifications Framework. And the big thing there is a career path means migration and articulation. How do I articulate? How do I career path? And I can career path right up, or I can career path horizontally. One of the good things is the way we're doing the social service practitioners articulation career path now is that there's going to be a big drive to educate society and up and coming youth as to, in the social service practitioners career path, this is not dentistry, it's not engineering, it's not medicine, so please don't think that with career pathing comes certain standards for salary. So people will learn that a professional title is not going to give me a certain salary, specifically because the country can't afford it. Or if you don't like it, go study medicine, or like you've said, go study IT, or go study, But this is the one part where a lot of social work professionals, registered social workers, earn at NGOs smaller salaries than confused sociologists like myself. Yeah? A 3-year graduate, a fresh graduate that graduates this year with a sociology degree can earn almost 7,000 Rand more than a 4-year professional social worker. And so I think it's our obligation to educate young people on it. The career path will be part of that. And so there's now a pilot with SAQA to show all the different articulations and how I go from what we call a community development worker. Now, this is also interesting. Certain government departments say a community development worker is somebody with a 3-year degree. Once we be professionalized, a CDW will actually mean somebody at a level 4. So somebody that's just sort of less than a senior certificate. Then there will be an assistant CDP, a CDP, which is somebody with the level 5. And then there will be a CDP, which will be the person level 8, 9, and 10. But then there's the people with level 3, 2, 1, and 0. And so part of professionalization, because we follow an inclusive process, is continuous professional development. So once there's a professional body and I'm registered, it says to keep your registration, you must attend training or at least dialogues even like this. So think about that, because that's also going to help where community volunteers can come and say, look, it's not about I don't want the qualification, I'm just a volunteer. But they will also have the opportunity to upskill or to be part of dialogue and be part of the process. So we can leave it at that, because otherwise I'll keep you here until next Friday when we're going to go do the policy.
All right. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, and I think I've been wrapped over the knuckles for allowing people to just go on and on and on, which is exciting because it's exciting times for community development and professionalization thereof. So I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to our panelists. And if you have any further questions, find them somewhere. They're in the corridors of UWC or the corridors here of Cornerstone, and have a conversation. So thank you so much. It's extremely valuable and extremely interesting, and I'm looking forward to the next chapter.
Thank you again to the panelists. If you can just pass these little tokens of appreciation down. But I just also want to note that we have phenomenal women on this panel. They are making a difference in our communities. And you know, when we say communities, we're saying it in a very general way, but we know these are our marginalized communities. These are the people who need these interventions the most. So I just want to say thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And then also to acknowledge and just for you to spread the word that these two students, the one is on Nikki's on our higher certificate program in community development, and Heinelise is on our honors program in community development. And they both have bursaries from Community Chest. And next year there's 30 bursaries for the higher certificate and 15 for the honors program that are available. So please do spread the word. Go to the Cornerstone website, and let's all become part of this movement to professionalize the sector. Thank you so much. Yes, in 2 years, part-time, yeah. Thank you so much. Okay. And thank you, you did so well. No.